This jet was supposed to be America's ultimate insurance policy. Instead, it became the most expensive weapons program in human history. It's 10 years late. It's 80% over budget. So how did one American stealth jet go from future of air power to national security nightmare? Let's get into it. On paper, the F-35 sounded like a shortcut. In practice, it turned into a grind. In the late 90s, the Pentagon tried to solve multiple problems with one answer. Instead of designing new jets separately for the Air Force, Navy, and Marines, they pushed for one family of stealth fighters, a regular takeoff version, a short takeoff and vertical landing version, and a carrier version. Allies would buy it too. Everyone would share parts and software, and costs were supposed to drop as thousands of jets rolled off the line. To move faster, they built jets while they were still testing and fixing them. Software came in blocks, stepping from basic training to full combat capability, all sitting on millions of lines of code that had to make sensors, weapons, and the helmet work together. That size and complexity meant bugs, rewrites, and delays, and by 2009, the schedule was already slipping hard. Then, the airframe started fighting back. The Marine F-35B showed cracks in fatigue testing. The Navy's F-35C had an arrestor hook that couldn't reliably grab carrier wires in early trials. Each time something broke or underperformed, engineers had to redesign parts, retest them, and push the whole timeline and the budget even further out. Here's where the problem stopped feeling abstract and started getting embarrassing. Tests showed the fuel tanks were too vulnerable to lightning. That's not a small detail when your whole job is flying through bad weather with a full load of jet fuel. The super advanced helmet that was supposed to replace a normal head-up display, it shook, glitched, and struggled at night, so the see everything visor sometimes made it harder to see. On the Air Force version, the internal gun wasn't even shooting straight because the mount was misaligned and cracking. And on the B and C models, the rear tails kept getting cooked by the afterburner during hard flying. None of this was something you could fix with a quick update. Every issue forced engineers back to the drawing board. More redesigns, more testing, more money burned. By 2011, the Pentagon basically admitted the whole plan had fallen apart and rebooted the schedule and budget from scratch. That first combat-ready date slipped from 2010 to 2015, and the top acquisitions official later slammed the entire concurrency approach as straight-up acquisition malpractice. And that big early promise that all three F-35 versions would share about 70% of their parts? It never happened. In reality, the overlap landed closer to 25%. Instead of one streamlined system, the U.S. ended up with 3 different jets wearing the same label, each with its own parts, supply chain, and maintenance headaches. The money situation spiraled just as fast. When the contract was awarded in 2001, the entire program was pitched at roughly $200 billion in early 2000s dollars. By 2005, the Government Accountability Office was already warning that costs and timelines were drifting. They weren't drifting, they were exploding. By 2017, the projected acquisition cost hit about $406 billion. And when you add operations and maintenance through 2070, the total life cycle cost swelled to around $1.5 trillion, making the F-35 the most expensive weapons program in human history. Even the cheaper parts aren't cheap. The F-35A now flies off the line in the low $80 million range. The B and C versions cost more. And that doesn't even include the engine. That's another $20+ million on top. Flying it isn't cheap either. The F-35A's hourly cost sits in the mid-$30,000, higher than many of the jets it's supposed to replace. By 2023, the program was roughly 80% over its original budget and about a decade behind schedule. At that point, it stops being a simple procurement mess. When one jet consumes that much of the defense budget, it becomes a national security problem on its own. Money that could go to tankers, drones, munitions, or modernization gets swallowed by a single platform. You end up betting your entire air strategy on one aircraft, and that aircraft depends on software, supply chains, and stealth coatings in ways older jets never did. The scary thing about the F-35 isn't just what it does in the sky. It's how easy it is to knock the whole system around it off balance. The jet isn't just a fighter, it's basically a flying gaming PC plugged into a giant global network. That's where the power comes from, and where the trouble starts. The first big idea was ILICE, a logistics system that was supposed to be genius. Any F-35 lands, plugs in, and the system tells you what's broken, which parts you need, where they are in the world, and when to fix what. One system to manage the entire fleet. In reality, ALICE was slow, buggy, and needy. It wanted constant secure internet and still gave bad answers, grounding jets that were fine and missing real problems on others. And everyone realized the obvious risk. If an enemy ever hacked that system or fed it fake data, they wouldn't need missiles. They could just keep your jets stuck on the ground. The Pentagon switched to a new cloud system called ODIN, which runs better, but the core issue stays the same. One digital backbone for almost the entire Western stealth fleet. If that spine breaks, a lot of very expensive jets become very shiny lawn ornaments. Even when no one's attacking it, keeping the F-35 ready hasn't been easy. The design tried to make maintenance simpler, tougher stealth skin, easier to reach parts, smarter actuators instead of giant hydraulic jungles. On paper, it looked like a mechanic's dream. In practice, parts took months to repair, depots backed up, and shortages meant jets sat waiting instead of flying. Some squadrons hit great readiness on deployment, but across the whole fleet, the numbers lagged behind what the Pentagon wanted. For an ordinary fighter, that's annoying. For the main jet you're betting your future air power on, that's a weakness you can't ignore. This isn't just a mechanics are annoyed problem. If your whole air strategy depends on a jet that's expensive, complicated, and hard to keep flying, you're basically balancing your security on one wobbly chair. On the battlefield, the F-35 is scary good. Once it finally showed up in real numbers, it proved what it could do. The radar, the 6 infrared cameras, the targeting pod, the electronic warfare system, the jet blends everything into one clean picture. The pilot just looks at a big touchscreen and the helmet visor and sees the whole fight at once. The F-35 quietly spots enemies first, shares that view with other F-35s, talks to older jets, and can fire before most opponents even know it's there. In training, it racks up huge kill ratios against older fighters. In real wars, it's hit targets in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, against ISIS, Iranian-backed groups, the Taliban, and Houthi drones and missiles. Israel uses its custom Adir version all over the Middle East. Marines launch F-35Bs from small assault ships. Navy F-35Cs fly from big carriers in the Pacific and the Red Sea. On paper, the jet delivers what it promised. The problem shows up when you look at who depends on it. The US wants thousands of F-35s. The UK, Italy, Japan, Norway, Australia, the Netherlands, Denmark, Israel, South Korea, and others already fly it. More countries like Finland, Germany, Switzerland, Poland, Canada, Greece, Romania, and Singapore are joining in. Old fleets of F-16s and Tornadoes are being retired. That means a huge chunk of Western air power is slowly turning into one jet, one supply chain, one giant software system. If you're an enemy planning for the 2030s, that's actually convenient. You don't need to beat 5 different fighters. You put your time into understanding this one. Maybe you invest in radars that see stealth better. Maybe you go after the logistics and mission planning networks with cyber attacks. Maybe you study where F-35s usually fly from and refuel. Maybe you use politics to slow exports or divide partners. We've already seen how fragile that can be. When Turkey bought the Russian S-400 air defense system, the U.S. kicked them out of the F-35 program so Russian engineers wouldn't get a free peek at the jet. Turkey lost its future F-35 fleet and its job as a parts supplier. The program had to scramble to replace those components. One country got dropped, and the shock still rippled through the whole system. When so many allies depend on a single aircraft, every political crisis, every export fight, every maintenance issue becomes a strategic vulnerability. And the nightmare isn't finished. The jet is still changing underneath everyone's feet. Block 3F, the final setup for the original F-35 development phase, only really got finished around 2023 to 24 after more than 17,000 hours of flight testing and a mountain of simulator work. And the second that wrapped, the jet ran straight into its next headache. Block 4. Block 4 is the big midlife upgrade pack. It's supposed to bolt on more weapons, including custom ones for partner nations, a new AN/APG-85 radar, stronger electronic warfare, wider sensor bandwidth, better targeting, and tools like a remotely operated video-enhanced receiver so troops on the ground can see what the jet sees. All of that hangs on new avionics hardware called Technology Refresh 3, or TR3. A faster core processor, more memory, and a new cockpit display. That's where things started to drag. TR3 hit serious delays and nasty regression bugs, bad enough that the Pentagon actually paused F-35 deliveries for a full year while engineers tried to untangle it. No TR3 means you can't load Block 4 software. And without Block 4, the jet can't fully use the new weapons and features allies already signed contracts for. The cost of Block 4 has jumped from around $10.6 billion to over $16 billion, and completion has been pushed from the mid-2020s to the end of this decade or even beyond. More recently, projections suggest full Block 4 capabilities might not be ready until roughly 2031. This means the jet that was supposed to be fully done years ago is still a moving target. Every delay affects operators, training, and war plans. And every dollar spent patching and upgrading one platform is a dollar not spent building redundancy somewhere else. Even the engine turned into a debate. The F-35 runs on the Pratt & Whitney F-135, a cousin of the F-22's engine, but tuned more for raw thrust and efficiency than long supercruise. It's a monster, over 40,000 pounds of push and afterburner, a stealthy sawtooth nozzle that hides the turbine and cuts heat signature, and on the B model, it also spins the lift fan that lets the jet hover. But as the jet's electronics and cooling needs kept growing, that engine started to run out of breathing room. The Air Force kicked off the Adaptive Engine Transition Program, chasing next-gen power plants like GE's XA-100 and Pratt's XA-101 with better fuel burn, more thrust, and a lot more cooling, basically built for Block 4's appetite. On paper, dropping a brand new adaptive engine into the F-35A looked tempting. In reality, making that work across 3 variants, including the short takeoff B and the carrier C, was a nightmare. So in 2023, the U.S. picked the safer option: upgrade the existing F-135 core instead of swapping it out. The engine core upgrade promises around 5% more thrust, 5% better fuel efficiency, and roughly 50% more cooling. That avoids splitting the fleet into different engine types, but it leaves a nagging question hanging in the air. If the jet is already flirting with the limits of its power and cooling today, what happens when the next round of sensors and weapons shows up and wants even more? How far can one engine design stretch before the whole system starts to groan? And then you've got the human side. Pilots genuinely love what the F-35 gives them. The helmet lets them see through the jet with a 360-degree infrared picture. They can lock weapons just by looking at a target. The big panoramic touchscreen lets them drag windows around, choose what to see, and focus on the full tactical picture instead of staring at separate dials. But that helmet costs about $400,000 each, and early versions shook, glitched at night, and were heavy enough to worry commanders about lighter pilots ejecting safely. Engineers eventually fixed a lot of that, but it took time and money. People on the ground notice in a different way. On paper, the F-35 is about as loud as an F-16. In real life, that deeper, low-frequency roar feels worse. It rattles windows, gets neighbors angry, and triggers noise studies and protests around bases like Luke and Eglin. For a jet that's supposed to be everywhere, that kind of pushback makes even day-to-day training harder than anyone expected. Allies feel it in politics, too. Parliaments argue over cost, nuclear roles, and dependence on U.S. tech, while Israel forced through its own F-35 with custom weapons and EW so it wouldn't be stuck with a sealed black box. That's the real story of the F-35, a jet that was supposed to simplify everything, yet still carries the pressure of being the one fighter almost everyone depends on. Give it steady upgrades, smarter software, and a support system that understands every bolt and line of code, and it can still grow into the aircraft today's missions demand. Because until there's a cheaper, cleaner, more resilient way to deliver stealth, sensors, and air dominance across half the world at once, the F-35 isn't going anywhere. It keeps its seat at the table. If clear, no-nonsense breakdowns like this help you understand modern air power, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive.